One of my favorite things to do in my shop is to, of course, acquire more tools, like probably most of you. And one of the things that I really didn't know was what kind of tools would I need or would make the jobs easier for adding the various accessories to my side-by-side. My name is Dave Tim from Guns and Tactics, and you're watching my series on my ultimate side-by-side, or the ultimate UTV project for range and play. I do appreciate you checking in. Again, this is a multi-part series. There's going to be multiple videos covering all sorts of different aspects of the project, and there will be an accompanying article on the webpage gunsandtactics.com that will have an easy link and page for all of the products and supplies that I used, as well as various videos and a little bit more background information as well. So once all the videos are uploaded, make sure you head on over to gunsandtactics.com and you can see more information. Now, back to tools and supplies. One of the things that I started doing was when I started figuring out what I was going to be doing, I started making a list of, okay, I want this, I want this, I want this, and I would just start basically buying stuff. Oftentimes it was actually cheaper for me to purchase a good chunk of something online or on Amazon versus buy 1 or 2 feet of wire or loom or something like that locally, if I could even find it locally. And as far as some of the tools needed, you're going to need general hand tools, sockets, ratchets, wrenches, screwdrivers, things like that, and pretty much everything on the machine is metric. However, I found that my machine must have been made on like a Friday afternoon or something, because when I went to take the bumper off to do the color swap, I actually noticed that 2 of the bolts mirrored were actually different size. One was an American thread, one was a metric, so it was pretty obvious one was either stripped or damaged or something, probably at the dealership, and then replaced with an American size replacement versus the metric. So I took the opportunity to just replace them both with a grade 8 metric bolt. So sometimes you might find stuff like that as well. But as far as, tools, we'll start with that. Some of the tools that I did buy, the number one tool that I would recommend you buy if you're going to be doing any work with a side-by-side or doing any of the things that I did with mine, is this auto body tool right here. This little tool with this little kind of fork hook flat makes accessing those little body panels much, much easier. And there is a ton of those body panels, taking off the fenders, taking off, the seat or the insulation or this or that or whatever. Those little body panels are all over the place. And this tool really did a good job of making much, much easier work out of that. So I highly recommend one of these. Pretty inexpensive. Even if you're going to be working, with your car or anything like that, having a small tool like this was really, really valuable. So I liked having this. Another tool that I would say is probably my close runner-up is the Nutsert tool, and of course the accompanying Nutserts. Now, if you're not familiar with what a Nutsert is, or a threaded insert, they are these guys right here. And the ones that I used the most of were these style right here. These are designed for thin walls, plastic walls, soft materials, or whatever, for basically adding a threaded receptacle anywhere you want. And this particular one is M6. Most of the threads that I put in various parts were M6. That's like the metric equivalent of like 1/4 which is arguably one of the most common American size fasteners. But you can get these threaded inserts in all sorts of different sizes. I have like a nice little kit going now with my metric and American, so if I have other projects. But if you've ever wished, like, man, I wish there was like a welded nut right here, that's what this can do. So basically you drill a hole, you insert this threaded insert, and then you use the tool, and it has an anvil, and when you expand, or pull down, I guess would be the correct term, when you press the tool down, it expands the threaded insert, basically wedging the insert in place, and now you have a threaded receptacle. And I tested this with a metric bolt. I did it on some scrap metal, put this in, and then tightened that bolt, more torque than I would have applied, and it got to the point where I felt like the bolt was going to break and the nut did not rotate at all, or the Nutsert, I should say, did not rotate or give at all. So I was really impressed with these. They do come in this style, which again produces a larger flange. The more traditional style is a shorter style like these, and this mushrooms a little bit less. This would be better for like going into a metal or really hard material where it has something more to grab onto, or maybe even a thicker wall, whereas this with the flange cuts here, they really almost kind of mushroom out, kind of like a hollow point bullet in a way. But these things are absolutely awesome. I used these on my doors, attaching the body panels for the side doors. I used them on the rear doors for attaching the hood pins for the storage, which was awesome, you know, for that to basically add it. It held really well in the plastic. I used these inside the frame in the hood to secure my electrical panel. I basically made a panel for my RCR Force 12 controller, or excuse me, the power regulator, the power module with all my grounds. So I made up a plate for that and I mounted that in there secure. I had to use these to attach my rear light bar. I added these to the rear frame, added these to the top frame to add my cargo and dome lights. These things were absolutely awesome, and I've used them all over the shop for other projects as well. So I can't say enough good things about these Nutserts. And if you don't have the tool, you can also use a bolt with an oversized nut, and you can just simply tighten that up. I had to use that method, using the bolt and nut, when I couldn't get to spots where the tool would reach, or if the anvil wasn't long enough for some of the Nutserts. So you don't need to buy a special tool, but these Nutserts are awesome. A couple other tools that I bought was a big wire cutter for cutting basically the thick battery cables. I did make my own battery cables, so I needed a nice snipper, something heavy duty. I had some wire cutters as well, but you know, buying this one made the job a little bit easier. And then also I did buy a larger electrical crimper, and again, this was used to crimp the battery lugs on my battery cables that I make. You can also use this, you know, for other projects as well, but for me, it's just one of those tools that I figured I'll probably end up finding another use for it, or now if I know anybody who's making their own battery cables or whatever, I can certainly loan them the tools. So that's the tools that I bought for the project. Now again, other tools that I needed: drills, multi-tool cutting tools, some basic shop tools that I had for fabricating and making my brackets. I used my mill for fabricating and making some little small parts for various things. And I'm blessed that I have a shop that has a lot of tools. However, you could do this with some basic hand tools as well. It just wouldn't be quite as easy, but you know, it does make the job easier when you have the right tool. Now, as far as supplies go, I ended up buying a lot of wire. 16 gauge was basically my minimum, and I have 16-2, which has 2 strands for some of the accessories. I have single for, you know, just running short ground leads. I also bought some trailer wire, which is 16-4, and that has 4 strands of 16 gauge wire in it in a kind of an insulated housing. And I wanted to use good quality wire because it was running from the front of the machine all the way to the back for some of the rear accessories. But I also wanted it to be weatherproof, heatproof, waterproof, snowproof, iceproof, whatever, so I didn't want to skimp. And I also wanted to make sure I bought the appropriate size. Now, if you're not familiar with what size or diameter wire you should get, go ahead and consult with the manufacturer or electronics vendor, or there's various charts out there, but you're going to need to know the voltage and the amps, and then you'll also have to know the distance, because the further distance you go, the bigger or larger diameter wire you'll need to safely carry that current. If you use undersized wire, you obviously risk having a fire, parts damage, you know, bad stuff like that, so make sure you're buying the appropriate wire. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the electrical video. I also bought some loom. I have way too much loom now. Maybe I'll give this away, I don't know, but I only needed like probably 8 feet, and I guess buying 25 feet seemed like a good idea at the time. So if anybody needs some loom that's local, I got that in a smaller size as well to insulate all the stuff that I ran underneath the side-by-side, so that's that. Electrical supplies, these little terminal connectors, I did use a few of these. However, the basic hardware store variety that I had on hand for just little projects wasn't quite optimal. So for my ground connections, I actually found these on Amazon, which they are heat shrink tubing. So after you connect and crimp your wire, you can then heat shrink this and it seals it up, and then this went right to my ground block, so that was kind of cool. Speaking of connecting wires, a few accessories I did solder the old-fashioned way, going back to like my freshman electronics, but then I found these heat shrink butt connectors that have a little ring of solder in them, and they actually worked pretty slick. You basically insert your 2 wires, you use a heat gun which melts the sealant, and then it also melts the little solder ring connecting the wires. I saw these on Amazon in little short videos and stuff, because again, I think my smartphone is listening to me, like probably most of you think. And I figured, you know what, I'm gonna give them a try, and the kit was pretty reasonably priced on Amazon, and they actually worked really good. I wanted as many of the connectors to be waterproof and sealed up as possible, so my preferred method was solder and heat shrink, And this kind of saved me a step, plus not having to get in there with the soldering iron and everything else, which was a pain. These were way easier and they are holding up really well. Now I did also use some heat shrink tubing, securing the lugs, heat shrinking my various solder connections, things like that. So some heat shrink tubing works out really well. Obviously you will need a heat gun. And that really kind of covers it for kind of the special stuff that you may not have on hand. Now, I'm sure there's something that I might forget, so if you have a question or want to know more about something, go ahead, leave a comment down below or send a question in. One of the videos that I plan on doing at the very end is kind of like a UTV QA. So if it's something that you feel I didn't cover or have a different question or whatever it might be, go ahead and leave a comment and I can try to address it in kind of that cleanup video on the UTV QA. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of go over some of the special tools and supplies that I use that made the job way, way, way easier moving forward. And then future videos are going to cover all sorts of different topics. Thank you guys. I do appreciate you watching. I hope you're interested in my UTV project. It was certainly a learning adventure for me, and I just wanted to share that knowledge with you because most of the people I know that are into firearms are also into doing stuff outside, and they like four-wheelers and side-by-sides and stuff like that too, so I hope it's helpful for you. If you have any questions, comments, cares, concerns, queries, conundrums, or complaints, go ahead and sound off in the comments section below. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. I sincerely appreciate you spending a few minutes with me. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. We work really hard to make content that we hope you as a shooter would enjoy. Subscribe to our channel, check out our featured videos and playlists, and if you have a question firearms related, go ahead and send an email to the address shown on the screen to be entered into our monthly QA series.